This podcast contains adult themes and graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised.
A commercial-free version of this podcast is available on Patreon for $1 per month. Patreon.com/Beyond Contempt podcast. I'm Renee, and this is Beyond Contempt True Crime. I don't have much of a preamble for this episode. I've never eaten at this restaurant and actually never even heard of it, even though Illinois is one of my neighboring states. The restaurant industry can be a brutal work environment. The people who owned and worked in this restaurant were wonderful individuals. All the employees said the owners treated them like family. You're listening to episode 29, Brown's Chicken Massacre, part 1 of 2. Richard Earl Eldenfeld was born to parents Donald and Rachel on November 10, 1942, in Portage, Wisconsin, which is a small town 30 minutes north of Madison. Dick's father was the mayor of Columbus, Wisconsin, where he had grown up, but eventually settled into running a laundry service. His family was profoundly religious and attended a Methodist church. Dick was an avid cyclist. He loved to read and enjoyed traveling. He never shied away from a good remodeling project. His friends thought he was a positive, down-to-earth person whose glass was always half full. Dick was a kind and generous individual, but was funny and would often make jokes at his own expense. Lynn Ehlenfeldt was born to parents Nathan and Joyce on October 6, 1943, in Clintonville, Wisconsin. Lynn's father was a county judge and her mother was a teacher. She also grew up in a devoutly Methodist household and was very active in her church. Lynn loved to read and went on air balloon rides for fun. She enjoyed sports and was a cyclist. Lynn was drawn to community service and often volunteered her time to different causes. She took part in Habitat for Humanity and was the junior grade books leader in Madison, Wisconsin, which was a program for gifted kids. Lynn was interested in the success of every child and expanded the program so it was open to everyone, not just the academically talented. She was known for being easy to talk to and was always willing to help anyone in need. There was an effort to organize a Methodist supper club on the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. Dick Eldenfeld and Lynn Weiss both volunteered for the event and were drawn to each other. After a period of dating, the couple eloped on December 21, 1964, in Dubuque, Iowa. They moved to Boston so Dick could attend seminary school, and Lynn worked in a social services job. During seminary school, they required Dick to spend some of his time volunteering. Like Lynn, he was attracted to community service and worked on Senator George McGovern's presidential campaign. Dick felt like he was making a difference and enjoyed the political arena so much that he worked full-time on the presidential campaign. Once the election was over and McGovern didn't win, Dick remained working for the senator as his press secretary. And he continued to have a job since McGovern won his Senate re-election in 1974. Dick and Lynn persisted in their service to their community and ran a halfway house in Dorchester, Massachusetts. When women transitioned out of the Framingham prison, the halfway house helped get the ladies ready for life in the regular world. Dick and Lynn wanted to return home, and in 1976 moved back to Wisconsin. Dick was still working in the political world, where he helped his father run for mayor and was a legislative liaison for Governor Martin Schreiber. By this time, the couple had 3 daughters, and Lynn opted to stay home with them. But she would still volunteer at church or at her kids' school. In 1978, Dick worked on a gubernatorial campaign for Douglas LaFollette. He ascended to the level of working on projects for both Ted Kennedy and Jimmy Carter. Dick even served as the Assistant Secretary of State for a term. Working in politics is not a 9-to-5 job, and when a campaign is in progress, it consumes almost every moment of a person's life. So in 1979, Dick left politics so he could spend some quality time with his wife and 3 daughters, because at heart, he was a family man. He took a job as a governmental liaison with a broadcasting company called Group W Cable. This company moved to Chicago, and Dick relocated with them. His family stayed behind in Wisconsin, and he traveled home every weekend to spend time with them. The rest of the family moved down to Chicago in 1981. In 1990, the Group W Cable Company laid Dick off. Lynn worked part-time as a mystery shopper to keep money coming into the family. Dick struggled to find a job and was unemployed for 2 years. He spent his time looking into franchises in the food industry that would be a good financial fit for his family. There was a franchise called Brown's Chicken and Pasta, which was a fast food chain in the Chicago area that specialized in fried chicken, Chicago-style sandwiches, pasta, and catering. John and Belva Brown started Brown's Chicken in 1949 in a trailer on 80th and Harlem in Bridgeview, Illinois. John Brown asked Frank Portillo Jr. to help get his business off the ground. Frank was well-versed in the business of restaurants, as his brother, Richard, started the famous Portillo's Restaurant Company and hot dog food trucks. Frank accepted the offer and eventually opened a second Brown's Chicken in Elmhurst, Illinois, in June 1958. The store performed so well that people asked if they could open their own stores. 5 franchise locations were opened by 1963, and 100 stores were opened by 1987. When KFC became a strong competitor to Brown's Chicken, Portillo added a side of pasta with each meal. In 1991, they renamed the business to Brown's Chicken and Pasta, and unfortunately, John Brown passed away at the end of 1992. Many out-of-work executives found success with Brown's Chicken franchises when they became owners. Dick thought Brown's Chicken would be an excellent opportunity. In spring 1992, Dick took the family's retirement and life savings of $300,000 and paid his way into the franchise and opened Brown's Chicken in Palatine, Illinois. This new business venture kept Dick and Lynn busy. They put in 16 hours worth of work daily from open to close. Michael Castro was a dishwasher and cashier at Brown's Chicken. Normally, Michael finished his shift at 10 p.m. and went straight home. The last hour of his shift was typically spent cleaning the fryers, taking out the trash, and sweeping up the restaurant. Michael worked a shift on January 8, 1993. Michael's father, Manny Castro, was tired, but his son wasn't home yet, so he went to bed. Around 11 p.m., Manny's wife, Epifania, woke him up and was concerned because Michael wasn't home from work yet. Manny drove over to Brown's Chicken in case the son was having car trouble, or maybe the store closing took longer than usual. As Manny pulled into the restaurant's parking lot, he saw Michael's car was still there, along with other employees' cars. Manny noticed it was dark inside the restaurant, minus one sole light over the counter. He knocked on the door, but no one answered, so he drove home and picked up his wife. They wanted to drive around and see if Michael was with one of his friends. It was 1 a.m., and they still could not find their son, and panic set in. Manny called the police to report his son missing, but the department couldn't make a report until someone had been missing for over 24 hours. The Castros were upset and begged the police to take action. Since Michael's car was still at Brown's Chicken, they promised to dispatch an officer to the restaurant. Manny and Epifania got back in the car and arrived at Brown's Chicken around 1:30 a.m. The police officer looked around the parking lot and peered inside the store. He suggested that the Castros drive back home to see if Michael had returned. Back at the Castro residence, Michael was still missing, so Manny called the police again in desperation. Officer Ronald Connolly was driving past Brown's Chicken and saw a car pull into the parking lot. The officer was curious at why someone was there at such a late hour. He pulled into the parking lot and questioned the driver of the car. Pedro Maldonado was looking for his brother Guadalupe, who had not come home after his shift. Officer Connolly was then dispatched to the Castro residence and arrived around 2 a.m. He saw how deeply upset Manny and Epifania were about their son, and he offered to drive back to Brown's Chicken. The Castros got in their car and followed Officer Conley to the restaurant. This time, the officer checked all the entrances, and he found that an employee door was unlocked. The officer turned on his flashlight and was looking around. Manny spotted his son's jacket, but Officer Conley stopped him and rushed him back outside. The officer spotted a bloody mop and immediately called us into the station. Officer Saxema quickly arrived at Brown's Chicken. He joined up with Officer Conley. They pulled out their service revolvers and entered the restaurant. The police duo saw a hand and a foot sticking out of the east walk-in freezer. Lynn Ehlenfeldt and Michael Castro were found in the freezer, along with Brown's Chicken employees, Guadalupe Maldonado, Rico Solis, and Marcus Nelson. Officer Haz arrived at Brown's Chicken and helped the other officers search the rest of the building. In the west walk-in cooler, they discovered 2 more bodies, Dick Eldenfeld and employee Thomas Menez. Most of the victims had sustained gunshot wounds. Some had bullet wounds in their hands and upper torso areas. Police thought the victims put their hands up to protect themselves. Additionally, Michael Castro had been stabbed in the abdomen, and Lynn had a gash across her throat. Officers instructed the Castros to go to the police station, where they were informed that their son had passed away. A 4th officer, Sergeant Robert Jacobson, arrived at Brown's Chicken. He slid grocery bags over his shoes to protect the crime scene and worked on removing victims from the walk-ins. The crime scene was so ghastly that the bags on his feet had saturated with blood, which soaked through the officer's shoes. Sergeant Jacobson's footprints were clear in the evidence photos. When he went home that night, his shoes were so destroyed that he threw them away, which was a colossal mistake. Sergeant Jacobson also never made a record of leaving his prints in the walk-ins. Dana Eldenfeld traveled back home from college and didn't arrive at her parents' home until 3:30 a.m. It was strange that no one was home, and the cars were gone, so she called the restaurant. When no one answered the phone, Dana and her grandmother, who was also visiting, headed down to Brown's Chicken. When they arrived at the restaurant, it was full of police cars, and they were informed that Lynn and Dick had passed away. Dana called her boyfriend and ensured that her sisters, Jennifer and Joyce, knew what happened. Some family members of the deceased were not happy with law enforcement on the night of the murders. Guadalupe Maldonado's brother Pedro and the Castro family felt that law enforcement had not taken their concerns seriously. Police had initially checked on the restaurant but never went inside, even though employees' cars lined the parking lot long after closing. They wondered if their loved ones could have been saved if police had just entered the building. "50-year-old Dick and 49-year-old Lynn Ehlenfeldt's funerals were held at the United Methodist Church in Columbus, Wisconsin. This couple were known for having big hearts and were the kind of people that offered help to anyone in need. They were 60s anti-war activists who remained true to their core beliefs. This caring couple dropped off leftover restaurant food to the convent daily. They devoted their lives to their family and lived a life of service. They were known for being compassionate, and if you needed clothes, a meal, or a place to sleep, they had you covered. The employees at their Brown's Chicken franchise felt that Lynn and Dick treated them like family. At the time of their passing, they had 3 daughters, Jennifer aged 23, Dana aged 21, and Joyce aged 19. 31-year-old Marcus Edward Nelson's funeral was held at the Algram and Sons Funeral Home. He was a Navy veteran, so he received a 21-gun salute, and they handed his mom a folded American flag. Marcus was buried in the Memory Garden Cemetery, the Veterans Garden of Honor. Marcus was born to parents Diane and Travis on December 30th, 1961, in Chicago, Illinois. In 1983, he married a Navy woman named Beverly, but because of his alcoholism, they divorced 4 years later. Marcus had 1 daughter whom he loved very much, and always sent more than his required level of child support to ensure that she had everything she needed. She was 7 at the time of his death. Marcus was engaged to be married to Joy McLean, and their wedding was set for 1995. Joy said Marcus was always smiling and laughing. He was a loving person who always believed in showing others grace. Marcus wanted to help his friends and family any way he could. He also enjoyed cooking and was a religious man. Marcus only worked at Brown's Chicken for 2 months and was supposed to be attending management training the day after his murder on January 9th, 1993. 32-year-old Thomas Edward Menez funeral was held at Montclair Louisiana Funeral Home. Thomas was born on April 12, 1960, in Elgin, Illinois. The Menez family experienced more than their fair share of tragedy. When Thomas was 14, his mother passed away after battle with cancer. Thomas' father, Emil, passed away several years after the Brown's Chicken Massacre. His 16-year-old neighbor repeatedly stabbed him in 1999. Thomas had several siblings, including a twin brother named Jerry, and another brother who passed away after a cardiac arrest in 1988. Thomas was described as quiet, peaceful, and loving. He was known to be a minimalist, and his brother thought all of his worldly possessions could fit in the trunk of a car. Thomas enjoyed games of skill with bowling and darts. He was an avid hunter and fisherman. Thomas was only employed by Brown's Chicken for 2 months before he was murdered. 47-year-old Guadalupe Maldonado's funeral was held at Santa Teresita in Palatine, Illinois. He was a citizen of Mexico and was later buried there. Guadalupe periodically came to America for better job opportunities and would send money back home to his family in Mexico. He wanted his children to have enough money to receive a better education. Guadalupe and his wife Beatriz had 3 kids. Juan was age 13, Xavier was age 10, and Salvador was age 5 at the time of their father's death. Guadalupe took English classes, was a cyclist, and loved playing soccer. His brother Pedro described him as being a good and helpful person. His wife said he was a friendly and outgoing guy who lived for and loved his family. He was a fantastic provider. Guadalupe returned to America for a 3rd time in 1992. Normally he worked as a cook at Ye Olde Town Inn restaurant, but his job wasn't starting until spring. He took a job at Brown's Chicken in the meantime. Guadalupe was only employed by Brown's Chicken for a few weeks before he was murdered. 17-year-old Rico Loreno Solis's funeral was held at Algrim & Sons Funeral Home. He was born to parents Ramon and Evelyn on February 6, 1975, in Manila, Philippines. Rico had 2 sisters that he enjoyed spending time with. Rico's father was murdered in 1987. His mother remarried and moved to the United States without her children. Rico helped care for his sisters when they stayed with their grandfather in the Philippines. Rico eventually came to America in May 1992. He adapted quickly to American culture and watched action movies like Die Hard. He played video games and listened to alternative music. He believed that America was full of opportunities. Rico wanted to save up to buy a Dodge Charger because it was a fast car, and he planned on joining the Marines. He was described as being a determined and hard-working kid. When he came to the United States, he befriended Michael Castro, who helped him get a job at Brown's Chicken. Rico was only employed by Brown's for 4 months when he was murdered. 16-year-old Michael Castro's funeral was held at the Algrim & Sons Funeral Home. Michael Crisostomo Castro was born to parents Manny and Epifania on May 24, 1976, in Chicago, Illinois. He was a junior at Palatine High School. Michael played classical piano, liked Star Wars, and played video games, and often cruised the city in his truck. Even though he enjoyed pulling pranks, Michael was very religious. He was described as being a caring person who was kind to those around him and was close with his family. Michael never lived to be old enough to join the military, so he was buried in a shirt that said U.S. Marines. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. Thank you to Best Fiends for sponsoring this episode of Beyond Contempt True Crime. Do you like puzzle games? Do you like to be entertained? Well, I like both of those things. That's why I really enjoy playing Best Fiends. It's a laid-back puzzle game that you play on your phone. I like Best Fiends because they keep it fresh by adding new levels and events every single month. It's a great game to play when I need to take a break from writing true crime scripts. And if my writing for this podcast is even half as creative as the characters in this game, then I know I've made the big time. And you don't even need to be tethered to Wi-Fi because you can play without an internet connection. Engage your brain with fun puzzles and collect tons of cute characters. Trust me, with over 100 million downloads, this 5-star rated mobile puzzle game is a must-play. Download Best Fiends free in the Apple App Store or on Google Play. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends. Hi everyone. I wanted to tell you about BetterHelp Online Counseling. It's an affordable service where you can connect with one of their licensed professional therapists. You can find counselors that specialize in anxiety, depression, family conflicts, trauma, and self-esteem. I work from home and rarely leave my house, so I really appreciate that you can communicate with your counselor from the privacy of your own home. So many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling. You can start talking with your counselor in less than 24 hours. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting BetterHelp.com/BeyondContempt. Join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp.com/BeyondContempt. Now, back to the show. Law enforcement said approximately $1,200 had been taken from the restaurant. They collected fibers, hairs, blood, and hundreds of fingerprints from the crime scene. On January 11, 1993, forensic scientist Dr. Jane Holmeyer examined all the trash cans. Most were empty, but one 4-piece chicken meal, a napkin, and a paper cup were discovered. When she looked through all the sales receipts, a meal had been purchased at 9:08 p.m. for $6.69, which required the cashier to reopen the register, since the restaurant closed at 9 p.m. Dr. Holmeyer carefully verified that the receipt matched the food in the trash can. She carefully bagged all the food items, kept them at room temperature, and processed them a few days later on January 14, 1993. She applied a solution to the napkin and found a partial palm print, which was photographed. On March 2, 1993, Dr. Holmeyer tried to link a suspect to the palm print, but there was not a match. DNA testing wasn't available at that point, but the doctor placed the chicken pieces in the freezer to preserve the evidence in case it could be tested in the future. Because of the high-profile nature of this crime, the Brown's Chicken Task Force was created, and the FBI got involved. The task force was comprised of Palatine PD, PD from neighboring counties, and FBI. They worked long, hard 16-hour days, trying to track down leads on this crime. They raised and offered a $100,000 reward by January 25th. In February, they paid for an enormous billboard that advertised the reward money. Police believe that there were at least 2 perpetrators who entered the restaurant through an unlocked side door around 9:10 p.m. and were there for 40 minutes. The perpetrators wrangled the employees and demanded money. Lynn can only open the top part of the safe, which contained petty cash. The bottom part of the safe that was not open was for bank deposits. This might have frustrated the perpetrators. Lynn's throat was sliced from ear to ear. Then they shot the rest of the employees, but the order of their passing could not be determined. A wall clock stopped at 9:52, possibly because of a stray bullet, and police suspected that's when the incident ended. One of the first suspects that was questioned was a man named Martin Blake. Brown's Chicken had fired him just after New Year's Day. On January 8, 1993, on the night of the massacre, Martin threw a party at his home, but left around 9 p.m. Someone called this information into law enforcement, and police surrounded Martin's home 12 minutes after receiving this call. He was arrested at gunpoint. They gave Martin a lie detector test, which he passed. He told police that he was with his friends when he left the party. Martin was held for 2 days and was not charged. There was controversy about the violation of Martin's rights. According to Martin, he was not allowed to speak with an attorney. An attorney even went to the police station but was led to believe that he was not allowed to talk with Martin. The police stated that Martin did not want to speak with counsel. Martin sued the Palatine police for false arrest in 1997, and he won just under $100,000 in a settlement. In that tight window of time after the murders, police were so convinced that Martin Blake had committed the crime that other leads were not followed, and other potential witnesses were never interviewed during that early critical time. On February 17, 1993, police talked with a man named Juan Luna, who was also a previous employee of Brown's Chicken. His girlfriend, Anne Laquette, accompanied him to the police station, but he was only questioned. His fingers and palms were printed, and he was released. Juan was interviewed one more time 2 years later, but he was ruled out. It was January 1994, and the Brown's Chicken Task Force dwindled to 10 people. They tested the chicken pieces that year, but DNA technology was not sensitive enough to produce results. The police still believed that they understood the basic facts of what went down on the day of the massacre, but a few new facts evolved. Dick Eldenfeld and Thomas Menez were in the cooler when the crime began. It was difficult for them to hear what was transpiring, and they likely didn't figure out that they were being robbed for a while. Dick's credit card and Thomas's watch were tucked in a box inside the cooler. They must have stashed their valuables once they understood what was happening. 4 employees were in the freezer while Lynn was opening the safe. Marcus Nelson and Michael Castro might not have been compliant, as they had additional wounds. Marcus sustained a blow to the head, and they stabbed Michael in the stomach. Police believe that Lynn did not resist, but frustrated the robbers since she wasn't producing money fast enough, so they slit her throat. The perpetrators relocated her to the freezer, and that is when everyone else was shot. At least 12 rounds were discharged in the freezer area, and 5 more rounds were fired into the cooler. 2 additional rounds hit the walls, and a 3rd round hit the ceiling. They only used 1 gun for the entire crime. The perpetrators mopped the floor to avoid stepping in a bloody mess. On the way out the door, they turned off the power, which killed the clock at 9:52. Only 1 light remained on over the register. The FBI thought that this attack was likely an afterthought and was not planned. In 1995, the chicken was sent off again for testing at the Chicago Field Museum. Unfortunately, DNA handling protocols were not followed. The chicken was partially thawed on a table, which was not sterile. It was also not isolated from foot traffic. The lab analyst did not wear proper attire to protect the sample. They handled the chicken without gloves, and they were not wearing masks. Subsequently, there were no significant results from the testing. On November 25, 1995, police interviewed a woman named Eileen Bacala. She had been with Juan Luna and a man named James Degorski on the night of the murders. Eileen had picked the 2 men up at the grocery store, and they spent the night at her house. She told police that they found out about the murders the next morning. No one was charged with the crime. In April 1998, a man named John Simonik was interviewed by police. Simonik denied any involvement in the murders. Later that year, on June 18th, a man named Todd Wakefield was interviewed by police. Wakefield had eaten a meal at Brown's Chicken around 9 p.m. on the night of the murders. Michael Castro entered his order into the cash register. Police believe that he was the last person to eat in the restaurant that night, and Wakefield was in agreement with that fact. He proclaimed he was innocent, and he hurt no one. In July 1998, John Simonik was interviewed again. He did not admit to being at Brown's Chicken on the night of the murders. Later that day, he had a second interview, and this time he admitted that he went to Brown's Chicken with his friend, Todd Wakefield. Simonik claimed that he sat in the parking lot and Wakefield came out of the restaurant with the money. The task force officer who interviewed Simonik pressed him and told him that this story was not true. Simonik changed his story again and said that he went to the restaurant with Wakefield, but was using the restroom when he heard gunshots. When Simonik emerged from the restroom, he saw Wakefield had a gun, and there were dead bodies in the cooler and freezer. Both men then drove to Todd Wakefield's house. In yet another version of the story, Simonik said he fired a shot at the pan that hung over the fryers. This could have been true, as police found that a bullet had hit that pan. With all the different tales spun by John Simonik, they released him without charges. Also in 1998, the chicken was tested again, this time by an Illinois State Police Forensic Science Center employee. The chicken was swabbed for saliva, and it was positive for DNA, and there were 2 profiles. The minor profile was consistent with someone who had touched the chicken, and the major profile was consistent with an individual who had eaten the chicken. Todd Wakefield's girlfriend was named Casey Sander, and she too was a former Brown's Chicken employee. Casey had recurring nightmares about the massacre. She was standing in the restaurant as each employee was being shot. When it came time for the gunman to shoot her, she woke up. Casey emphasized to police that this was just a dream, and the gunman was always an enigma. She never could identify him. On April 28, 1999, Casey Sander had a 10th interview with police, and a new story emerged. She said that her boyfriend, Todd Wakefield, picked her up around 6:30 p.m., and they went to Brown's Chicken after 9 because she needed to talk to Lynn about her work schedule. Wakefield followed her inside the restaurant. He spoke with Rico Solis and Michael Castro and became enraged. Wakefield pulled a gun and threatened to kill people. He then shot all the employees, and Casey ran back to her house. Wakefield followed her home, and Casey told police that they walked in the door behind her. Police wanted clarification as to who they was. Casey corrected her statement and said only Todd Wakefield walked into her home. Law enforcement told Casey that there was a size 8 footprint left behind at the massacre, and it probably matched her shoe. Casey claimed that she made everything up because she wanted the interview to be over. Police let her go. On August 5, 1999, police arrested John Simonik, and on August 9th, police videotaped Simonik's confession. Simonik claimed that he and Todd Wakefield were responsible for the murders. They went to Brown's Chicken, went inside the restaurant, and ordered food. About 5 to 10 minutes later, Simonik said he pulled a gun and ordered employees to the back area. 5 people complied and 2 refused. Wakefield took 5 people to the freezer, and Simonik took 2 employees into the cooler. He heard gunshots and knew that Wakefield had shot or stabbed the people in his custody. Wakefield reloaded his gun and handed it to Simonik. He was ordered to kill the 2 people in the cooler. He didn't want to do it, but Wakefield made him. At some point, Simonik shot the metal pan over the fryers, went back to the car, and waited for Wakefield. Wakefield then drove them home. There was no physical evidence linking John Simonik to the murders. He gave no consistent statement about the murders, and police let him go. There were so many rotating suspects, endless police interviews, and stories that constantly changed direction. The case went cold for 9 long years until 2002. That year, a new expert compared the DNA obtained from the chicken to a potential suspect and got a match. A second man was named as an accomplice when new witness information surfaced. We're going to stop right here, and in the next episode, we will tackle the rest of the investigation, the arrests, and the criminal trials for the Brown's Chicken Massacre. Please listen to this trailer for the Haunting History Podcast, who is covering an important cold case.
I'm Kat, the host of Haunting History Podcast, the podcast that reaches back into the past to the stories and headlines that still haunt us today. Approximately 76.2% of abducted children who are murdered are dead within the first 3 hours of their abduction. In so many of these cases, someone saw something, suspected something, or knew something and never reported it. On June 26, 1980, Carrie Patterson, a friendly and outgoing 15-year-old, left her home in Fullerton, California to meet up with some friends. She never returned. 6 months later, her skull and portions of her remains were found in an oil field in Tonner Canyon, kicking off what would become a 4-decade mystery, leaving her family heartbroken, a passionate cold case investigator without answers, and a newspaper reporter without an ending. Join us on November 4th as we talk to her family, the cold case investigator from the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and others still searching for who killed Carrie Patterson. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Haunting History Podcast, and subscribe wherever you listen. Our cold case series starts November 4th.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Beyond Contempt. Please visit BeyondContemptPodcast.com for links to the sources used in this episode. This episode was researched by Haley Gray. Scriptwriting, editing, and all audio production were performed by me. If you like the show, please leave me a favorable review in Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much, everyone.
In the cold kitchen light, we both look for a sign, and you say, these are troubles of mine. Weary thoughts of breaking up, coming under your skin. Don't know if we should stop or begin. 'Cause I was there by your side, with my eyes open wide, and I know that will always be true. There were no reasons why. Guess all beauty must die. We try hard, but we all so reckless, so reckless. It took time to recognize we are all filled with pride. I'm a wreck when I'm not by your side. Yes, I know that I have to agree. There is no one as reckless as me.